If you're drawn to stories that don't just entertain but linger, the kind that unfold slowly, reveal truths layer by layer, and stay with you long after the screen fades to black, then take a moment to subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you never miss a story that might change the way you see ordinary moments. Your support quietly fuels stories like this, stories about choices, consequences, and the invisible lines we sometimes don't realize we're standing near. At 43, I had come to believe that life, in its truest and most meaningful form, was meant to settle. Not in a dull or lifeless way, but in a way that felt grounded. Predictable. Safe. My name is Laura, and for 16 years, my husband Greg and I had built something that many people spend their entire lives searching for: a relationship rooted not in constant excitement or dramatic passion, but in trust, in understanding, in the kind of quiet companionship that doesn't need to prove itself every day. We didn't have children. That was a chapter life had quietly closed for us years ago. At first, it had felt like a loss, a silent ache that lingered longer than we ever admitted out loud. But over time, we learned to reshape our lives around what we did have rather than what we didn't. Careers that gave us purpose. A home that felt warm even on the quietest nights. Shared routines, morning coffee, late night conversations, small inside jokes that no one else would understand. There's a certain comfort in knowing exactly where you stand with someone. No guessing, no uncertainty, just peace. Or at least that's what I believed. Because what I didn't understand then, what I couldn't have understood, was how fragile that sense of balance truly was, how something so stable could be tested not by chaos or betrayal or anything loud and obvious, but by something quiet. Something subtle, something that didn't look like a threat at all. It happened on an ordinary Saturday night, the kind of evening that doesn't announce itself as important, the kind you step into without thinking twice. Greg's sister had invited us over for a small celebration. Her son Ethan was turning 23. It was the kind of family gathering we'd attended dozens of times before. Familiar faces, familiar laughter, familiar conversations that drifted effortlessly between past memories and present updates. Ethan had always held a special place in my heart. From the moment I first met him as a child, there was something about him, something thoughtful, observant, quietly intelligent. He wasn't loud or attention-seeking. He didn't demand recognition, but he noticed things. He listened. And over the years, I found myself naturally stepping into a role I hadn't expected. Not quite a parent, not quite just an aunt, but something in between. A guide, a listener, someone he could come to when he needed perspective without judgment. In many ways, without even realizing it, he had filled a space in my life I hadn't known was still empty. I had watched him grow, not just physically, but emotionally. I had seen him navigate adolescence, struggle with expectations, question himself, and slowly begin shaping his own identity. And I was proud of him more than I ever said out loud. That evening, everything felt easy. The house was alive with warmth. Conversations overlapped in that familiar, comforting way. Laughter rose and fell like waves, punctuated by the clinking of glasses and the soft hum of music playing somewhere in the background. Dinner stretched longer than expected, as it always did. Stories were told, memories revisited, plans discussed. Greg, unusually relaxed, allowed himself to indulge more than he normally would. Another drink turned into another. His laughter grew louder, his posture looser, his usual composure softening into something more carefree. I noticed, of course, but it didn't feel concerning. Just different. By the time the evening began winding down, it was clear he'd had too much, not in a dramatic or alarming way, just enough that his steps weren't entirely steady. His words slightly slower than usual. And that's when Ethan stepped in. "I'll help," he said. His voice calm but attentive. There was something in his expression, concern. Yes, but also kind of quiet responsibility. Together, we guided Greg to the car. It was such a simple moment. So ordinary. And yet, looking back, it was the beginning of something I didn't yet recognize. The drive home was quieter than the evening we had just left behind. Greg sat slumped slightly in the passenger seat, drifting in and out of awareness. The city lights passed by in soft blurs, casting fleeting shadows across his face. In the back seat, Ethan began talking. At first, it was casual. His studies. His future plans. The usual topics that come up when someone stands on the edge of adulthood, trying to map out a life that still feels uncertain, but gradually, something shifted. His tone changed. Slowed. Deepened. He spoke about pressure, not the kind that comes from external expectations alone, but the kind that builds quietly from within. The need to succeed, to make the right decisions, to become someone worthy of the belief others have placed in him. I just don't know if I'm doing it right, he admitted at one point. There was no dramatics in his voice, no desperation. Just honesty. And that honesty stayed with me. When we arrived home, the house felt unusually still. We helped Greg inside, guiding him carefully to the bedroom. He fell asleep almost instantly, the weight of the evening settling over him, and just like that, the noise of the day was gone. What remained was silence, a quiet that felt heavier than usual. In the kitchen, I poured myself a glass of water, trying to settle into the calm. Ethan stood nearby, unusually still. There was something about his posture, something restrained, as if he were holding back words he wasn't sure he should say. I noticed. And before I could ask, he spoke. Lavra? Can I ask you something? His voice was careful, measured. I turned toward him, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. Of course. He hesitated. Not out of uncertainty, but out of respect for the weight of what he was about to say. And then, slowly, he began to open up. What he shared wasn't about anything dramatic. There were no shocking confessions, no revelations that would shatter anything outright. It was something far more subtle, more human. He spoke about confusion, not about love, but about identity, about expectations, about the quiet fear of disappointing the people who believed in him. He talked about feeling lost in ways he couldn't easily explain. About not always knowing where he fit, about the pressure to appear strong even when he wasn't. Sure, he felt that way inside. And as he spoke, I realized something important. In that moment, I wasn't looking at the boy I had watched grow up. I was looking at a young man, standing at the threshold of adulthood. Someone searching. Not for answers exactly, but for reassurance, for grounding. For clarity. There are moments in life where the line between guidance and influence becomes incredibly thin, where what you say and how you say it can shape not just someone's thoughts, but their direction. And I felt that weight in that moment. I could have responded casually, brushed it off, given him something simple and reassuring, but something told me this required more than that. So I chose honesty. Careful, steady honesty. I told him that admiration, whether for people, for ideas, or for the lives others seem to have, can sometimes feel like answers, but they aren't. I told him that emotional closeness doesn't always mean direction. That connection, while powerful, isn't meant to define your path. It's meant to help you understand yourself better. And most importantly, I reminded him of something that even many adults forget, that boundaries aren't limitations. They're protections, not barriers to keep us from living, but guides that keep us aligned with what truly matters. He listened. Not passively, not distracted. But fully. The kind of listening that comes from someone who genuinely wants to understand, not just respond. And when I told him gently but firmly that whatever confusion he was feeling didn't define him, that it didn't need to control him, something shifted in his expression. Not dramatically, but noticeably. There was a quiet sense of relief. When he finally stood to leave, there was no awkwardness. No tension. Just a calm understanding. At the door, he paused briefly. Thank you, he said. Not just out of politeness. But with sincerity, the kind that tells you your words mattered. After he left, I remained in the kitchen. The silence felt different now, heavier but clearer, and as I stood there, I found myself reflecting on something I hadn't considered before. How easily life can drift into uncertainty without warning. How quickly ordinary moments can become defining ones, and how important it is not just to feel, but to choose. The days that followed were normal. Or at least they appeared that way. Ethan didn't withdraw completely, but there was a subtle shift, a respectful distance, a focus on his own growth. Greg returned to his usual self-steady, reliable, unaware of how quietly significant that evening had been. And me, I carried that night with me. Not as regret, not as something unresolved, but as a reminder A reminder that strength isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet. It's found in the ability to pause, to think, to choose the path that aligns with your values, even when emotions blur the edges. Because not every test in life comes with obvious stakes. Some arrive quietly, disguised as conversations. As moments. As choices that don't seem significant until you realize they are. And the truth is, some moments don't test by what we feel. They test us by what we choose to do with those feelings. If this story stayed with you, if it made you think, even for a moment, then don't forget to subscribe.